This is a continuation of the Chapter 6 lecture on bones and skeletal tissues. This is a table of the bone markings. You will need to be familiar with the name of the bone marking, you can see in this column, and the description for each of those different categories. Projections that are sites of muscle and ligament attachment, projections that help to form joints, and depressions and openings allowing blood vessels and nerves to pass. I will give you an example in class. So I would show you the iliac crest. It would be labeled number 1 with the definition beside it, narrow ridge of bone, usually prominent. And you would tell me that that is an example of a crest. There's different bone textures, compact bone and spongy bone. Compact bone is composed of structural units referred to as osteons or Haversian systems. This type of bone is very dense. It's usually the outer layer of long bones. Spongy bone is composed of trabeculae. It looks like honeycombs. Let's begin by discussing the structure of long bone. Long bones consist of a central shaft known as the diaphysis. The ends are epiphyses. One end is epiphysis. Plural is epiphyses. The diaphysis is the central portion, or the shaft, of long bone. It's composed of compact bone that surrounds the medullary cavity. The medullary cavity contains red marrow in children, and this is where hematopoiesis occurs. Red marrow is replaced by yellow marrow in adults. The ends are referred to as epiphyses. The exterior is composed of compact bone, and the interior is composed of spongy bone. The joint surface is covered with hyaline cartilage, known as articular cartilage. The diaphysis is separated from the epiphyses by the epiphyseal line. In children, this is referred to as the epiphyseal plate, because it contains cartilage that's still growing and undergoing mitosis for interstitial growth. The plate will be replaced by an epiphyseal line in adults when the bone stops growing interstitially. This is the macroscopic view of the structure of long bone. The central portion, or the shaft, is the diaphysis. The ends are epiphyses. The proximal epiphysis would be closer to the body. The distal epiphysis would be farther away from. The shaft is composed of compact bone and a medullary cavity filled with yellow marrow in an adult. The outer layer of connective tissue is referred to as the periosteum. Long bones retain articular cartilage on the end. The separation between the epiphyses and the diaphysis is referred to as the epiphyseal line. We can also see the periosteum, or the dense connective tissue, on the outer layer in this view. Connective tissue that lines the medullary cavity is referred to as endosteum. Structures that secure the periosteum to the dense compact bone are referred to as perforating fibers or Sharpey's fibers. Notice the difference between compact bone, which is very dense and composed of structural units known as osteons, versus spongy bone, a very porous type of bone, looks like honeycombs, composed of trabeculae. Let's review some of the structures of long bone again. The shaft is referred to as the diaphysis. The ends are epiphyses, a proximal epiphysis closest to the body and a distal epiphysis farther away from the body. On the end of long bone we have hyaline cartilage, known as articular cartilage. Surrounding the diaphysis is compact bone, a dense bone composed of osteons. The epiphyses contain spongy bone, composed of a needle-like network known as trabeculae. The epiphyses and diaphysis are separated by cartilage in children known as the epiphyseal plate, which gets replaced by the epiphyseal line in adults. The epiphyseal line signifies that the bone is no longer undergoing interstitial growth. It's no longer increasing in length. And finally, the connective tissue that surrounds the compact bone is referred to as the periosteum. In this slide, you can see the difference between compact bone, composed of osteons, a very dense type of bone, versus spongy bone, composed of trabeculae. The periosteum is secured to compact bone through Sharpey's fibers or perforating fibers. In an adult, the medullary cavity contains yellow bone marrow. In a child, the medullary cavity contains red marrow, where hematopoiesis occurs. The connective tissue that lines the medullary cavity is referred to as the endosteum. Let's talk about the bone membranes. The periosteum is the outer layer. It's a double-layered membrane. The outer layer, or the fibrous layer, contains dense regular connective tissue. The inner or osteogenic layer is composed of osteoblasts. These are bone builders. I remember because of the B, osteoblast for building, and osteoclasts, which resorb bone. Osteoblasts will increase bone layers. Osteoclasts will reduce bone layers. The periosteum is secured to the bone by what are called Sharpey's fibers or perforating fibers. The endosteum is the membrane that lines the medullary cavity. Now let's talk about the structure of short, irregular, and flat bones. Unlike long bones, short, irregular, and flat bones have no diaphysis or epiphyses. They contain thin plates of periosteum, which cover compact bone, and endosteum that covers spongy bone on the inside. The spongy bone is referred to as diploe. short irregular and flat bones also contain yellow marrow. It's found between the trabeculae. This is a figure showing the structure of flat bone. Notice there's compact bone on each end and spongy bone in the center. The spongy bone in the center of the compact bone is referred to as diploe. Flat bones are found in the skull. The sternum is also an example of a flat bone. The location of hematopoietic tissue is different in infants and adults. In infants, the medullary cavity of long bone contains red marrow. This is where hematopoiesis occurs. Hematopoiesis in infants also occurs in all areas of spongy bone. In adults, hematopoietic tissue is found in the diploe of flat bones and the head of the femur and humerus. The medullary cavity of long bone is replaced with yellow marrow in adults. Now let's talk about the microscopic structure of bone. Compact bone is composed of structural units known as osteons. Haversian system is also a term that could be used in place of osteon. The osteon is surrounded by lamella. One layer is lamella, many layers lamellae. Lamellae contain collagen. In the center of an osteon is known as the central canal or the Haversian canal. It contains blood vessels and nerves. So therefore we know that bone is innervated and vascularized. There are channels that lie at right angles to the central canal, known as Folkmann's canals or perforating canals. These connect blood and nerve supply of the periosteum to the central canal. Osteocytes are mature bone cells. Osteocytes begin as osteoblasts that secrete the matrix. They get trapped in the matrix to become the mature cells known as osteocytes. Osteocytes are found in small pits or cavities known as lacunae. There are small canals, very small canals, known as canaliculi, that connect the lacunae to each other and the central canal. The canaliculi will feed the osteocytes that are trapped in the matrix. This is a microscopic structure of compact bone. Here we can see the structural units known as osteons. Osteons are surrounded by layers of collagen known as lamellae. Lamellae found in between the osteons are known as circumferential lamellae. In the center of an osteon, you'll see the central canal, which contains nerves and vessels. Canals that run to right angles to the central canal are referred to as Folkmann's canals or perforating canals. Immature cells known as osteoblasts secrete the matrix. They get trapped in the matrix to become the mature cells known as osteocytes. Osteocytes lie in pits or openings known as lacunae. Lacuna is singular, lacunae is plural. Small, tiny little canals radiate from the central canal, known as canaliculi. Canaliculus is singular, canaliculi is plural. These tiny canals give the osteocytes that are trapped in the matrix nutrients. Let's review some of the structures of compact bone. The osteon is the structural unit. It's surrounded by layers of collagen known as lamellae. Collagen in between the osteons are composed of circumferential lamellae. In the center of an osteon, we see the central canal, which contains nerves and vessels. Canals that lie to right angles of the central canal are Folkmann's canals or perforating canals. Osteoblasts are immature cells that secrete the matrix. They become trapped in the matrix and become mature bone cells known as osteocytes. Osteocytes lie in pits or openings known as lacuna. Lacuna is singular, lacunae is plural. Small canals that radiate from the central canals to provide nutrients to the osteocytes are known as canaliculi. Canaliculus is singular. This is an additional microscopic structure of compact bone. Notice the osteon, the structural unit of compact bone, the central canal, which contains nerves and vessels, and the small openings or the pit the osteocyte lies in, known as lacuna. Bone contains both organic chemicals and inorganic chemicals. Some of the organics include osteoblasts, or bone-building cells. Osteoblasts will become the osteocytes, which are the mature bone cells. Osteoclasts resorb bone or break down bone matrix. Osteogenic cells are actively mitotic stem cells found in bone. And the osteoid is unmineralized bone matrix. It's composed of proteoglycans, glycoproteins, and collagen. Some of the inorganic components of bone include hydroxyapatites, or what's known as mineral salts. The mineral salts compose about 65% of bone mass. Its main component is calcium phosphate. It's responsible for the hardness of bone and its resistance to compression.